The audience noticed it first in the third song. Not because anything was obviously wrong. The voice was exactly as it always was, warm and precise, and filling the arena with a particular ease that 20 years of performing had made second nature. Everything was correct. And yet something was different. Something in the way Michael moved between songs, not the confident, slightly self-deprecating patter that audiences had come to expect, but a shorter version of it, slightly compressed, as if he was rationing something. Something in the way he stood at the microphone when he was not singing, very still, in a way that looked like composure but felt, to those paying careful attention, more like concentration. The concentration of someone managing something privately while performing something publicly, doing both with great discipline. The audience did not know what they were seeing. They were not supposed to know. They had paid for a concert, and they were receiving a concert, and Michael Bublé was giving them everything they had come for, note by note and song by song, with the professionalism of someone who understood that the show continuing was not negotiable. But backstage, 2 hours before the show, one phone call had changed what the show meant. And by the end of the night, the set list on the music stand, the carefully planned sequence of songs his team had built over weeks of preparation, would be almost unrecognizable. Not because anything had gone wrong technically. Because Michael had made a decision, mid-performance, that the songs he had planned to sing were no longer the right songs. And the songs he chose instead told a story that nobody in the arena understood, except him. This is the story of that night. And of the woman in a hospital room, 300 miles away, who was the reason for all of it. Amber Santaga Bublé was the kind of mother that children describe, when they are grown and have enough distance to see clearly, as the person who made them possible. Not in the obvious biological sense, though that too, but in the deeper sense. The person whose specific quality of love and attention created the conditions in which the person they became could actually become that person. She had raised Michael in Burnaby, British Columbia, in a household where music was present but not professionally serious. She sang around the house. She encouraged without pushing. She listened to him practice the standards his grandfather Mitch Santaga had introduced him to, and she heard something in it that was not a hobby. She heard something that was going to become his life, and she supported that with the quiet, practical generosity of a parent who loves their child more than they love their own certainty about what is best for them. When Michael's career began to take shape, slowly, through years of wedding receptions and corporate events and small clubs, Amber was there in the way that mothers are there for children they believe in, attending shows when she could, maintaining the specific faith that parents who really see their children maintain, even when the evidence is ambiguous. She had believed before there was evidence, which is the only kind of belief that actually costs something. She was the reason, more than any other single reason, that a performer existed at all for audiences to see. And on the night in question, a Tuesday evening in October 2013, in an arena in Toronto that held 14,000 people, she was in a hospital in Vancouver, in surgery. And Michael was on stage. And that was the whole situation in its full impossible complexity. The show had to go on, and the person who had made the show possible was not there to see it. The call came at 4:37 in the afternoon, 2 hours and 23 minutes before Michael was due on stage. He was in the dressing room in the specific pre-show state that performers develop over years of touring, not quite focused yet, but no longer entirely relaxed, moving through the rituals of preparation with the practiced ease of someone who has done this enough times that the rituals themselves have become a form of concentration. His phone was on the dressing table. He saw the name on the screen, his sister Crystal, and the quality of his attention shifted immediately, because Crystal did not call before shows. She knew the protocol. The fact that she was calling meant something had happened. He answered. Their mother, Amber, had been admitted to hospital that morning with a cardiac event. She was in surgery now. Ow. The surgery was necessary, and the medical team was confident, but it was surgery. Significant. Not trivial, the kind that required her children to know it was happening. Crystal had waited as long as she could before calling, trying to time it so that Michael would have the information without having so much time to sit with it, that it became impossible to go on stage. He thanked her. He told her to call him the moment anything changed. He set the phone down on the dressing table, face up, and looked at it for a long moment. Then his tour manager Greg knocked on the dressing room door. Michael looked at Greg and said, "My mother is in surgery. I'm going on." Greg nodded. He had worked with Michael long enough to understand that this was not bravado and not denial. It was simply a decision, made by someone who understood what his mother would want him to do, and was doing it. What Greg did not yet know, what nobody knew, was what that decision would actually look like once it was on stage. The show began on time. Michael walked out into the arena the way he always walked out, with the specific ease that audiences read as confidence, and that was, in fact, a form of genuine warmth. The warmth of someone who is glad to be in a room with people who are glad to be in a room with them. He said the things he always said. He made the audience laugh. He settled into the first song with the practiced naturalness of someone for whom the stage is the most comfortable environment in the world. For the first half of the show, the performance was everything the audience had come for. The voice doing what the voice always did, making people feel that the world was warmer than they had remembered, that love was more available than they had feared, that the longing articulated in these songs was universal rather than isolating. His band, the musicians who had toured with him long enough to know his performance the way you know a piece of music you have played hundreds of times, noticed nothing in the first half that seemed out of the ordinary. Michael was Michael. Present, professional, giving the audience exactly what they needed. The phone was in Greg's pocket, backstage. Turned on. Waiting. Between the sixth and seventh songs, Michael took a slightly longer pause than usual. He adjusted the microphone stand. A small gesture, the kind that looks like technical adjustment. But he glanced toward the wings during that adjustment, toward the place where Greg was standing. Greg gave a small headshake. No news. Nothing yet. Michael returned to the microphone, and the show continued in both registers simultaneously. The one the audience could see and the one it could not. The set list called for Cry Me a River at position 9. It had been in the set for the entire tour, placed deliberately, because it was a showpiece, because it demonstrated the range and control of the voice in a way that audiences consistently responded to with something close to awe. It was one of Amber's favorites. She had told him this years ago, before his career was what it became, when he was still performing in smaller venues, and she would sometimes attend and sit in the audience and watch her son do the thing she had always believed he could do. He had sung it at shows she attended. He had thought of her when he sang it at shows she did not attend. The song had a private association that the audiences receiving it could not have known about. It was, in a sense, her song, the one he had always sung with her in mind, whether she was in the room or not. At position 8, 30 seconds before Cry Me a River was due to begin, Michael looked at the set list on the music stand. His band was in the brief pause between songs. He picked up the set list. He looked at it, and then he set it face down on the stand. His keyboard player, Alan, noticed this first. In 18 months of touring with Michael, he had never seen the set list put face down. He looked at the other musicians. Several of them had noticed too. There was a brief professional exchange of glances, the silent communication of musicians who have played together long enough to have a shared language without words. Michael looked at Alan and named a different song. Alan looked at him for just a second, the fraction of a second that contains a question and its answer simultaneously, then nodded and began the opening bars. The other musicians followed, as experienced musicians do, adjusting without comment, trusting that there was a reason, providing the foundation the performer needed for whatever he was about to do. They could not have known what it was. They gave it to him anyway. What followed was 40 minutes that the musicians on stage would discuss for years afterward. Not because it was visibly emotional, not because Michael broke down or made any public acknowledgement that something had changed. He did not. The audience had no idea that anything was different from the plan. What changed was the selection of songs. The songs Michael chose in those 40 minutes were not random. They were not the greatest hits that audiences expected. They were something more specific, the songs that had mattered privately over the course of his life, songs associated with specific people and specific moments, songs that meant things the audience receiving them could not have known. He sang The Best Is Yet to Come, a song he associated with a particular faith that the future would be better than the present. which was the faith he was trying, very hard, to sustain on a stage 300 miles away from a hospital in Vancouver. He sang How Sweet It Is, a song about gratitude, about recognizing the value of what you have while you have it. Gratitude was the dominant emotion of the hour, more present than fear, more useful than fear, the thing he was choosing instead of fear because the alternative was not going on stage. He sang The Way You Look Tonight, a song about holding an image of someone you love in a form that time cannot reach, which was what he was doing in the only way available to him from a Toronto stage, keeping his mother present in his attention, in the songs he chose, in the specific private dedications that the audience received as entertainment, and that were also something else entirely. The band played what he gave them and asked no questions. They gave him the musical foundation he needed and stayed out of whatever was happening above it, because that was their job, and because they understood enough to know that the job mattered tonight in a way that went beyond the professional. 14,000 people went home from that show without knowing what had happened. Not a single person in the arena knew that the second half of the performance they had received was not the second half that had been planned. The setlist changes were invisible to everyone who did not have a copy of the original. The songs were familiar. The voice was the voice. The warmth was the warmth. And yet, several people who attended that show wrote about it afterward, in blogs and social media posts that live concerts generate. They used words like different and deeper, and I don't know what it was, but something was different. They said the second half felt more personal than the first. They said they couldn't explain why they cried during How Sweet It Is when that was not a song that usually made them cry. They were right that something was different. They could feel it without being able to name it, which is often how the most important qualities of a performance communicate themselves, not through anything you can point to, but through something that arrives in the chest before the mind has processed it. What they were feeling was a man singing songs to his mother from a stage, in the only way available to him from that distance, sending something toward a hospital room that could not receive it directly, holding someone present in music because music was the language he had, and the distance was absolute, and this was what he could do. They felt it without knowing what it was, which is perhaps the truest way to feel anything that actually matters. The phone rang at 9:47, during the third song of the encore. Greg felt it before he heard it, the vibration in his jacket pocket that he had been waiting for since 4:37 in the afternoon. He stepped into the wings, away from the monitor speakers, and looked at the screen. Crystal. Dot. He answered. He listened. He said 2 words. Thank you. He ended the call and stood in the wing for a moment, looking at the stage where Michael was singing. He did not interrupt the song. He waited for it to end, for the applause, for the moment between songs when Michael turned briefly toward the wings, which he did, every show, at this point in the encore, a small habitual gesture toward his team. Greg caught his eye, and Greg nodded. One slow, clear nod. Michael looked at him, held the look for a moment. Something moved through his expression that was not visible to the audience because he was still facing toward the wing. Then he turned back to the microphone. He stood there for 3 seconds, which is a long time on a stage, in silence, with 14,000 people watching, and then he said, simply, one more. He sang the last song. It was not on the original set list. It was not on the modified set list he had constructed through the second half. It was a song he chose in that moment, in the 3 seconds between Greg's nod and the microphone, for reasons that were entirely private and entirely sufficient. He sang it the way he had sung everything that night, with the voice the audience had come for, giving them everything they deserved, holding nothing back. And also for someone else entirely. Someone who was no longer in surgery. Someone who was going to be all right. The reviews of the Toronto show were warm, as Michael Bublé concert reviews always were. Several noted that the second half had felt particularly strong, intimate, one critic wrote, without being able to explain what he meant. Another noted that the setlist had diverged from the published running order in ways that suggested spontaneity, which she described as a welcome quality in an artist sometimes associated with polished predictability. None of them knew what they were describing. Amber Bublé recovered fully from the surgery. She was in hospital for 4 days after the procedure, and Michael was there for 2 of them. The tour paused for 48 hours between Toronto and the next date, a gap that the scheduling had coincidentally created. He flew to Vancouver and sat beside his mother's hospital bed and was her son rather than a performer for 48 hours. He did not tell her what had happened during the Toronto show. He did not tell her about the set list face down on the music stand, or the 40 minutes of unplanned songs, or the way How Sweet It Is had sounded different coming out of him that night. He did not tell her about Greg's nod in the wing, or the 3 seconds at the microphone, or the final song. He did not tell her because she already knew, in the way that mothers know things, that he had thought of her, that he had done what she would have wanted him to do, gone on, kept going, given the audience everything, and that in doing so he had also given her everything he had. That was sufficient. Some things do not need to be reported because they were always understood. Years later, in an interview, Michael was asked about his mother. He spoke about her the way he always spoke about her, with genuine warmth and the particular love that does not require demonstration, because it is simply present in how he talks about everything she was and is to him. He said she was the reason he kept going when keeping going was hard. He said she had heard something in him before anyone else heard it, and that this early hearing had been the thing that made the later hearing possible. He said, "She gave me the voice. I mean that in every sense. She didn't teach me to sing, but she taught me that singing was worth doing before I knew how to do it well, and that belief is what the voice came from." He did not tell the interviewer about Toronto. Some things are not for interviews. Some things live in a different register from the things you say to journalists, in the register of the private, the specifically yours, the things that matter most precisely because they are not for public consumption. But the Toronto show happened. The set list exists, or rather, the 3 versions of it exist, the original, the modified, and the final, each different from the last, together telling a story in their differences that is entirely legible to anyone who knows what they are looking at. Song 9 was supposed to be Cry Me a River, Amber's favorite, the song Michael had always sung with her in mind, whether she was in the room or not. He did not sing it that night. He sang everything else, everything that surrounded it, everything that held the same emotional territory, but not that song. Not that one. He is saving it, perhaps, for a night when she is in the audience, for a show she attends when he can look out from the stage and find her face and sing it directly to her, which is what that song has always been for. A delivery, waiting for the right moment. A song held back not from the audience but for the person it was always meant for, sitting in the room, present, there. The night he sang the wrong songs, he sang every right thing. The audience felt it without knowing what it was. And the woman it was for recovered and is still here, and the song is still waiting.